of India.
Yes.
Wittingly and unwittingly, he is emboldening the morale of terrorists and their patrons across the border.
Okay.
Therefore, to save his skin, maybe Mr. Chidambaram has compromised the war against terror.
Rajeev Chandrasekhar, as you are hearing the politicians, is there a real fear that this issue of corruption is no longer about law and justice, but is about straightforward politics? Parliament session coming up in a few days, both sides want to embarrass each other with this demand for an instant resignation.
No, Rajeev, there is part merit in what Ravi Shankar ji is saying, which is that you can't escape the fact that there will be politics when there is a debate about corruption in India. I mean, frankly, the opposition, whether it's in a state government or in the central government, is the one that will try and hold the executive and the existing government to account. But that having said, and that should be the limited role of politics. The issue of corruption itself is an absolute issue. There is no relativity of corruption. There is no we have heard excuses being trotted out from Mr. Sibal saying there is no loss in telecom. We have now heard yesterday, 24 hours ago, him trotting out this whole consumer interest argument. Invariably, politicians trot out some alibi to distract away from the core issue of corruption. Okay. Corruption is an absolute issue. It is yes or no.
It is an absolute issue, but Paranjoy, look at what A. Raja, the telecom minister, does. Yesterday, he seems to make it very clear that the Prime Minister and Chidambaram knew all the moves that he was making. Today, he says that I did not mean what I said. It's the media which has interpreted this in a particular manner, almost as a U-turn on that. I never indicted the Prime Minister and Chidambaram. In that sense, are we jumping to conclusions too early?
Mr. Raja is blowing hot and blowing cold. He's been in jail for almost 6 months now. He's been in jail for this, since the 2nd of February. At one level, he first says, the Prime Minister and the then Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, are responsible. Today he said, no, I didn't want to implicate that. He also said today that Mr. Chidambaram should be called in as a witness.
Yes.
What he also said today, that if he had not gone by the Law Ministry's suggestion to set up a GOM on this whole spectrum pricing issue, the Prime Minister could have overruled. So he's kind of blowing hot and blowing cold. On this issue of corruption, I want to make 2 points. I think we in India we are truly unique. In the sense we not only distinguish between more corrupt and less corrupt, we distinguish between the corrupt and efficient and the corrupt and inefficient. It's a bit like, whenever Gujarat 2002 riots is brought out, the BJP always remembers November 1984 anti-Sikh riots. So whenever you talk about 2G scam, they remember Yediyurappa. And whenever Mr. Yediyurappa is targeted, he remembers, the 2G scam.
That's right. So it becomes, in a sense, you're making an important point, it becomes a zero-sum game. And Ravi Shankar Prasad, the danger is, you're a member of the JPC, for example, the fear is that even the JPC on the 2G scam will be politically divided. It's not an absolute issue of corruption, as Rajeev Chandrasekhar puts it, but an issue which is decided by your political binoculars. If you're in the BJP, then you want Chidambaram to be brought and hanged before the JPC. If you're in the Congress, you want to protect any congressman who's identified with the 2G scam.
I don't think that will be a fair assessment to make, Rajdeep. I'm a member of JPC. You have seen 11 MPs, including of my party, were expelled for taking money to ask questions by the ethics committee.
Yes.
That is also the parliament.
Yes.
One thing let me tell you today with a sense of assurance, Rajdeep. Don't compare corruption like this, because the ultimate litmus test is the popular sanction. And I know of a very popular Prime Minister of the 80s having 3/4 majority, losing very heavily when a perception grew about corruption against him. And I know of a very powerful leader of social justice movement of my own state of Bihar, who repeatedly got enmeshed in corrupt activities, and today he has been reduced to 25 with his ally.
That's an interesting...
My point I'm saying, in India, the point I'm trying to highlight, Rajdeep, is, in India, the public opinion is so strong that there is a profound perception about your corrupt deeds.
But look at Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, look at institutions. If we say corruption is an absolute, don't compare one corruption with the other. See what happened in the Public Accounts Committee on 2G. It was divided on political lines. Your own leader Yashwant Sinha, former finance minister and member of the JPC, is already calling for Chidambaram's head. My point is, it appears at the moment that corruption is seen through political binoculars. It's not seen as an absolute, which is why political parties compare one form of corruption to the other.
That will not be a right comparison to make. The same PSC was working very well. Even the Prime Minister publicly appreciated Dr. Joshi as a very seasoned parliamentarian and offered himself to present himself. But the moment Dr. Joshi's whole investigation went to calling the PMO officials, then all the hullabaloo started.
No.
That's the crunch. You must understand it. Therefore, if 2G scam is the biggest scandal of independent India, it has to be properly investigated. And I come to my point. But for an assertive opposition, an aggressive media, you included, and the monitoring by Supreme Court, 2G would not have been allowed to be investigated because the Prime Minister twice gave certificate of innocence to Mr. Raja. You know it very well. July 2010 and 26 October 2009.
Okay, point taken. You believe that it's but for the opposition, these scams you believe would not have come out. But Satyavrata Chaturvedi, the question is coming. It's becoming about political one-upmanship. Even before the Lok Ayuk's report is tabled in Karnataka, you go for Yediyurappa's head because as Paranjoy says, it gives you an opportunity perhaps to deflect from the Congress or the UPA's involvement in 2G. So corruption is not seen as an absolute by our political parties. It's seen as something for scoring points over the other.
Corruption is a reality, howsoever we may dislike it, but that is a reality. And no political party, let me say with all responsibility, and no political party is totally rid of it. No political party can say that they don't have corrupt individuals. The question is, the basic question is, individuals in political parties may be corrupt and there will always be some number of such people, but what is important is, let the political parties refuse to institutionalize corruption. What is the more worrisome to us is that this debate in fact gets lost, and the basic issue that all political parties will have to come down to one thing: fight corruption institutionally within and without.
But will that happen? Will that happen?
Yes, it can happen.
Rajeev Chandrasekhar, these are fine words. Satyavrata Chaturvedi saying the system must institutionally fight corruption, but we've seen in the past, we've seen it with the Sukhram, former telecom minister, was put in jail, eventually became a part of both the BJP and Congress governments in Himachal. So it isn't as if corruption leads to social ostracism. It isn't as if political parties are institutionally willing to take on corruption.
No, and I agree. I think, I think the danger, Rajdeep, is to make this discussion of corruption a moral issue. I think if you put a politician or anybody close to this kind of administrative discretion, people will dip into the cookie jar. How corruption can be addressed is through an institutional mechanism of oversight and transparency. We have to make it difficult for people to be corrupt.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I agree with Mr. Chaturvedi, which is, this is a turning point for India, and how political parties respond to allegations of corruptions within will define how those political parties are seen by the people, because the people of India are today completely involved in this debate on corruption, and it is really for the political parties to start demonstrating that they are taking different approaches to corruption, and they are not
the flip
letting
side,
it slide under the carpet.
The flip side of what is being said, Paranjoy, is that many political parties believe that even if you are accused or guilty of corruption, it doesn't affect your electoral viability. We've known so many political parties which come back to power even after their leaders are caught with their hands in the till.
But Rajdeep, we have a recent example of what happened to the DMK in Tamil Nadu. So everybody says, okay, corruption doesn't matter, 2G doesn't matter. The DMK was wiped out of that state. But the point is, when you talk about institutionalization of corruption, where does it begin? It begins in the manner in which election campaigns are funded. That is where political parties across the board, Congress, BJP, everybody is not coming together to reform the electoral system. The way in which elections are funded, there is a clear quid pro quo. That's why you have this unholy nexus between business, crime and politics. That, to me, is the fountainhead of corruption. That is why corruption gets institutionalized.
Ravi Shankar Prasad, you want to make a point. The point I want to ask you, though, is then why don't you jointly fight this war on corruption? If you and Satyavrata Chaturvedi are genuinely serious, for example, of taking on political corruption, why don't you and Satyavrata Chaturvedi come together? The problem is most people feel you won't, because corruption is fought on party loyalty lines, not on in an institutionalized basis. Whether it's a Yediyurappa in Karnataka or whether it is a Raja at the center, it is seen through political blinkers.
We have always stated, and let me say today, General Secretary of the BJP, that if the government has certain corrective legislative measures in mind, we are willing to support it. funding of elections, Advaniji has been raising it over the years. But I want you not to become the representative of despondence and doom.
Yes.
Some leaders of DMK, Pranjan rightly pointed out, thought they can purchase the votes. They used to send lifafas. And what happened? People took the color TV, including the cable linkage, saw what happened in the 2G, and voted the incumbent party massively out.
Final word, do you believe that? Do you really believe that, Satyaved Chaturvedi, that at the end of the day, if a person is perceived to be corrupt, he will be voted out by the electorate? That's the only check at the end of the day in our democracy?
I wish that happens.
But you're not sure it will happen?
No, I've seen, there are hundreds of examples before me, where I've seen most corrupt, brazenly corrupt men getting elected against somebody who's known for his honesty. And this is what is happening. We're discussing all this academically here, my dear, but when you go down to the earth and where you go to the fields, the situation is very different. Now you were talking about DMK. My friend raised the issue. I agree with him. DMK is removed because of corruption charges. But who's brought back? And the one who's brought back, is it not true that a few years ago she was also shunted out of power because of similar charges?
She was perceived to be a lesser evil.
Lesser evil and larger evil. This is where I say, please don't make compromises on corruption.
But the
lesser or larger is not the question.
Okay, but the point is, if someone is an ally of your government, you will not act against him. If someone is a valued chief minister, you will not act against him. The politicians on this program are saying corruption should be an absolute factor, but it ends up being relative.
You very rightly raised a very important issue. Sukhram was shunted out of Congress. The day he was shunted out of Congress, 13 days the Lok Sabha could not run because BJP didn't allow it.
Okay, I'm going to give it. Ravi Shankar is dying to get a final word.
The moment he was shunted out of Congress, he was just taken and welcomed into BJP.
Final word, Ravi Shankar Prasad.
This kind of a thing will have to stop.
Will we see a united fight against corruption, or will it be Yediyurappa on one side and Raja on the other?
I again tell you, when you indulge into massive corruption, the law of the country, the media, the opposition, the PIL, India is changing, Rajdeep. Satyaved Chaturvedi has a point. But we have seen Lalu Prasad being defeated. We have seen Rajiv Gandhi being defeated. We have seen recently what has happened in Tamil Nadu about the Kalaingar, which is a massive following, and the sons and all the retinue attending on him.
Okay, so you say the glass is half full. Okay, the glass is half full, the glass is not half empty in this battle against corruption. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Satyaved Chaturvedi, appreciate your joining us on India at 9 tonight.